Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 7, episode 23. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week I'm talking to Liz, who was actually a guest back in season 5. Liz is up in Canada, has misophonia, and a son with autism. She's had a number of comorbidities over the years, including having dealt with postpartum depression. We catch up and see how things have changed and what she's learned about living with this and raising her son. After this show, let me know what you think. You can reach out by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And of course, I'd like to remind everyone to head over, leave a quick review or rating wherever you listen to the show, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever. Now, the more reviews we get actually helps drive us up in the algorithms, which helps us reach more listeners. A few of my usual announcements. Thanks again for the incredible ongoing support of our Patreon supporters. And welcome Tiramisu, I think that's a code name, as our latest supporter on Patreon. If you feel like contributing, you can read all about the various levels at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. And of course, I want to mention the book Sounds Like Misophonia, a self-help book about misophonia, written by Dr. Jane Gregory with contributions from myself. It's available everywhere you find books, published by Bloomsbury UK, and you can order online or ask for it at your favorite bookstore. This episode is also sponsored by Basil, the personal journaling app that I developed for iOS and Android. Basil provides AI-powered insights into your journal entries and guides you with new writing prompts based on those insights. You can even explore many different therapy approaches, modalities, and philosophies. It's fun. It's available at iOS and Android. Check the show notes or go to hellobasil.com. All right, here's my conversation with Liz. Liz, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you. I think it's been a year since I spoke with you last.
Yeah. And are you doing kind of the same thing? Kind of like you want to guess
pretty much
Yeah.
exactly the same. Yeah.
Do you want to kind of give kind of an update? I know that you want to talk a little bit about your son with autism, I believe.
Yeah.
But I don't know, you want to kind of give us a general kind of like update on kind of how the year has been?
Interesting. I have a sleep disorder that seems to have gotten much worse. And so even staying awake for this right now is bad timing.
Yeah.
But the one thing I have noticed is that whenever he brings some disease home from that germ factory we call a school, and I catch it, and of course I have it for at least 3 weeks, anytime that my immune system is down, my misophonia is a lot more acute, and I'm a lot less tolerant. So over the holidays, this time I still did get it from his school, but it's because I went to his school's Christmas concert, because he was actually the last one to get it in the house this time. But it was a really bad stomach flu, and I couldn't stand any sounds, like even just ones that you never noticed before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of this stuff that comes with a physical ailment is a lot of the stress, obviously, and you're probably not, if you have having sleep issues, obviously, these are things that kind of obviously exacerbate. That must have just those things must have gotten worse as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, does your son also have misophonia, or is it?
It doesn't seem like he does. It's more the sensory processing disorder than misophonia. So what commonly is associated with autism. He can't handle certain sounds, usually loud. Like the vacuum cleaner, he always has to put his earmuffs on for that. But in terms of the stuff that typically triggers me, so the chewing and the sneezing, coughing, repetitive stuff, he does that a lot.
Yeah.
So he and I have had conversations about different types of neurodivergences, and
Yeah.
He knows. I will try to tolerate it as long as possible because some of it is self-soothing. He's stimming, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to stop him from being able to do that. But at the same time, the repetition will get to a point where I'm going to end up vomiting. So I tell him, "Okay, we're triggering my misophonia now," and he'll stop.
Now,
So
is the vomiting, were you saying vomiting is a figure of speech or like literally? Yeah,
no, not a
yeah.
figure of speech. No.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
no, I just because I'm sure people were late, so I just want to make sure that yeah, that people are hearing that
no,
because that's,
that
yeah,
was
yeah.
it's definitely a very strong physical reaction, and it's specifically to repetition.
Mm,
I discovered that when I was 14, and I was trying to write the lyrics down from some really strange song. And so I had to keep going back and, back and forth, back and forth. So I was hearing this song a lot over and over. By the time I got to the end, I got up and ran to the bathroom and threw up.
wow, wow.
And that was it. I wasn't sick. So I
Did
hadn't really thought about that
yeah,
for quite a while until I was seeing a psychologist for postpartum depression at the time. And we ended up talking about that. And she was like, you have you ever heard of misophonia? I think you have misophonia. And I'm like, what?
oh really?
Yeah. And that was the first time I was like, oh, all those years in high school where I wanted to strangle everybody, I wasn't nuts.
Right. Well, we are nuts, but just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, we
So
label.
they are.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, exactly. Um, actually, yeah. Talk about that psychologist. So you said postpartum. I'm just curious, kind of what about that discussion that was supposed to be about postpartum led her to start thinking about misophonia? Was there
Well, I
something?
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been in therapy, but you kind of explore everything. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I was seeing a psychologist specifically referred for postpartum depression when my son was
Hmm.
born, and we might have just been talking about things that irritate me because, you know, with a new child, you're getting sounds you're not used to,
Hmm.
and most of the sounds that came from him actually didn't trigger anything. It was a separate thing, but I started to talk about high school and how if anybody cleared their throat, like I wanted to punch them in the neck. And
Ditto. Ditto.
yeah, exactly. And that I thought that perhaps I had an anger management problem.
Ditto.
And
Ditto.
so so she explored a little bit further, and yeah, that's where my diagnosis came
Yeah.
from. I was like,
Makes
oh.
total sense. Yeah. Um.
And the funny thing was I was even referred by her to another psychologist who was doing a DBT course. It had nothing to do with this, but I remember having to bring that up at one point because it was a group thing, and somebody came in with a cold, and I was just holding on to my chair while they're
Yeah.
sniffling. And so I explained it, and the gasps in the room, like people thought I was going to go violent on them.
Yeah.
And the that particular psychologist wasn't aware of misophonia. It was the first time she had heard it,
Mm.
and yet she was a colleague of the other one that had
Hmm.
diagnosed me.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately the word is still getting around very slowly about misophonia. Um. Yes. Was anybody able to help professionally at that point?
Um, no, I didn't. I didn't seek help specifically for that, but
Yeah.
because I was taking dialectical behavioral therapy, there's a lot of different mechanisms that they use anyway for coping strategies, and so some of those skills are transferable.
Yeah. Right.
Um, yeah. Uh, you know, Basically mindfulness is always a big part of it, but I also try to just avoid humans in general because I don't like them.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I
I've
don't
got
know if,
issues. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if misophonia sparked my misanthropy or
Hmm.
I don't remember ever actually liking people, but
Hmm.
I also don't remember never being bothered by noise. I know a lot of the people that you've talked to, there's usually a triggering moment in their lives.
Yeah, a lot of people, yeah, and around the
Yeah.
same age and whatnot. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't ever remember not being angered by
Mm.
those sounds.
Do you have memories, or have people told you about uh, moments in your life from an early age when you kind of showed signs of this?
Nothing that I can recall being told,
Hmm.
but I guess part of it would have been they wouldn't really know what I was reacting to
Mm.
either.
Right.
So if I was that, but I just know that there wasn't a point that I can remember not reacting to it.
Right.
But I always knew, even really, really young, that it wasn't normal per se to want to hurt somebody just because they're clearing their throat. So I did whatever I had to do, remove myself from the room or turn up music or whatever to
Mm.
distract myself.
Yep. 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 Um, oh yeah, actually, I wanted to get back to want to get to one point before because I'm going to forget a bunch of good questions. But about your son, I'm curious. Was there an age when him triggering you start to happen? Or was there an age when was there a age range where it wasn't a trigger and then it started to happen?
Um, yeah, it's there's a very fuzzy time period
Mm-hmm.
during the postpartum depression because my my depression began when he was 3 weeks old, but it wasn't diagnosed until he was 6 months. So I was living in a very paranoid state for quite a while,
Yeah.
um, and I wasn't actually part of my own head. So anything then I have no recollection of, unfortunately. And
Yep.
so I don't know if anything triggered me during that time or not.
Yeah.
Once I started receiving treatment for the postpartum, I would say, hmm, I want to say it was probably about the age of 2, but it would have been. I think he was older actually when the sounds started. Like it was the other usual sounds that were triggering me when he was about 2, but it wasn't him.
Yeah.
Um,
Gotcha.
and then as he got older, probably around 4, I started noticing that when he would repeat sounds, and it probably coincided with the fact that that's when he did it as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Like he wasn't doing it before.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to say 100%, but I think really probably around when he was 4 years old, which would have also been when he was starting to demonstrate certain characteristics common with autism.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Um, and okay, and then but now switching back to you growing up, you said people didn't maybe notice what you were reacting to. I guess, yeah, I guess what started to happen is as you got older, it probably started to become clear probably that you were mostly triggered by sounds. How did that kind of evolve, like at home and then at school?
Um, Fortunately, I have no recollection of anybody in my family specifically being a noisy eater
Uh-huh.
or making any of those sounds. So dinner was always pleasurable. It wasn't a torturous event for me like it has been for so many others with
Yeah.
misophonia. But coughing, sneezing,
Yeah.
sniffling, clearing throats, I call them organic sounds. And I would say, hmm, I probably started making the connection around 8 years old that my anger always
Mm-hmm.
arose when I heard those sounds, but
Mm-hmm.
it might have even been earlier because I just know I'd hear the sound and I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, again, I think probably right from the beginning. As I got a little bit older, I started to try and develop a theory as to why those sounds would cause such a strong reaction. And I started
Mm-hmm.
thinking about survivalism and what would that kind of response have done, maybe 1,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't even remember what I'd come up with because, like, that's 14 years old. And I
No.
bounce around with those theories from time to time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
It is
always
interesting to think about, yeah, how that
I'm always
evolutionarily,
convinced
yeah.
when it comes to stuff like this, especially now that we're finding out that it is more common than we ever realized, right? Um, there has to be a reason for it. I know that it is referred to as a neurological disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think disorder is actually apt for
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
particular. I do think it's evolutionary in the same way that I think autism is actually the next step in evolution of the human
Mm-hmm.
brain.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I want to talk about this. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely think so. So I believe that this is some part of, I don't know, some survival mode. Now the only thing is, between individuals, you've got freeze or fight or
Right.
flight. So I don't know if one served better than the other. I know my default is fight. So I
Yeah.
I'm very, very aware.
Well, I want to get back to the yeah. I want to hold that thought and get to the
Mhm.
yeah, hear about it, fight fight moments. But yeah, I want to but yeah, I want to mention it. Yeah, because you're right. It's called a neurological disorder. I feel like, I mean, I may be effing this up, but disorder basically just means it's like anything that's kind of like disrupting your normal, I guess, kind of day to day life. It doesn't necessarily mean defect. And so and that's why I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's something about misophonia, which is either, yeah, this heightened sense of danger awareness or seeking out danger that was necessary a long time ago, is always necessary. And yeah, but I've always kind of, I guess, debated in myself, like, does this mean that we just kind of have this thing we need, but at too much of a heightened level, or yeah, is this kind of like a next step? Are we doing it, in the future? Are we going to need people who are extra sensitive to sounds to warn us of some danger? I definitely, whatever it is, I do agree that it's not your body, it's not something wrong with your body, it's your body trying to warn you something in good faith, you know.
Definitely.
And
Well,
we just
from the simplest perspective, sorry to interrupt you.
no.
Um, COVID really proved something. It proved many, many things over the
Hmm.
past couple of
Yeah.
years. So, for those of us who have that reaction when somebody coughs and you want to take
Oh,
them out,
there you
well,
go.
think about it. They're gone. They're not spreading it around.
Yes.
If,
Yes.
if all the mesophones that are fight reactive uh, were permitted to do what we want to do, I don't think it would have lasted 2 years.
Hey, we should have been like a canine unit, If we can go
Yeah,
around, like, instead of sniffing for drugs, if we're listening for COVID and take those people out, no
yeah.
questions asked. We would have had no
It would have
lockdowns or
it
anything.
would have been dealt with a lot
Yep.
quicker, I
Yep.
swear.
Yep.
But
That's
apparently there's this whole moral imperative.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, what are morals? I mean, they
It's
they're
subjective.
yeah, it's subjective, but it's yeah, they should evolve,
That's true.
So I think that should be the big takeaway from this conversation, actually, to kind of like add something to that. My issue with a lot of I guess I don't want to say therapies, but like directions in research is like it's very much looking at misophonia as a problem that needs to maybe get a pill to fix or something like that. I feel like that's not necessarily like maybe the best way to go about it. I don't feel like we need to like call it, make it seem like an evil defect. There's
Well,
something
see,
that maybe,
that's
yeah.
that's exactly it. That's why, the word disorder, because
Mm-hmm.
it suggests abnormality,
Right.
right? There's the norm, and that's like, autism is a neurodivergence. It's
Yes.
different from what's typical, although we're also seeing that being diagnosed a lot more too. So I
Mm-hmm.
prefer to refer to it as a neurodivergence because it
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, just it diverges from my son's divergence. So,
Right. Right. Right.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's interesting. Do you think, and this might be going off topic, but I love this kind of like type of discussion. Do you think things like autism or misophonia, are they being diagnosed more now because maybe as a society we're becoming too homogenous and normal, or it's or maybe we're just able to identify things or advocate for these things a bit more?
Well, I know for misophonia, that's definitely an awareness thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because a
Right.
lot of us are adults and we're only finding it out now. So, we've lived
Right.
40, 4 decades or whatever with it. It was there
Yep.
the whole time.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Autism, there have definitely been huge steps in terms of the process of diagnosis because they learn that females display very differently from males, and
Mm.
they were diagnosing based on the male characteristics because those were, I guess, a
Oh.
lot clearer to understand. But I have watched a lot of TEDx talks
Mm-hmm.
of different autistic individuals, and the females always say the same thing, like they weren't diagnosed until they're like 30 something, and then all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
their lives made sense. And it was
Mm-hmm.
because they present differently. So the
How
one
do
thing that
females present? I'm just kind of curious.
um I think because we tend to be nurtured in a certain way by whatever the society norms are. Um, Girls mask a lot quicker, a lot earlier in life, and masking is exactly that. It's hiding those
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
So they learn earlier on how to fake being acceptable. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
with males, I think maybe there's a bit more of a struggle for them to recognize why they're not fitting in and how to mask. So the females, I can't really speak to it because I don't have autism, so
Yeah.
I'm not 100% certain, but I just know that they all said they presented differently. So
Gotcha.
there's a female version and there's a male version, and I know the DSM-5 has the newest diagnostics for it, and it's a little more clear, I think. Um, but even for my son and his autism, we went to a developmental pediatrician who said, "Nope, he's ODD," and I'm
What
like,
is
"Okay,
ODD?
oppositional defiant disorder."
Oh.
Yeah, and because it does present that way because he's struggling to
Mm-hmm.
communicate,
Yeah.
so it seems like he's in opposition and being defiant. However, it didn't gel with the behavior. It didn't click for me. And then I took him to a pediatric psychiatrist. Same thing. He's like, no, he doesn't have it.
Hmm.
And then I finally got referred to uh, a specialized unit where the doctor was like, yes, he does. She's like, it's subtle things that are showing. And I was like, no, that's interesting. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's luck of the draw who you end up with. Like, how
Yeah.
would I have ever found out that I have misophonia if I didn't have postpartum depression and end up with this particular psychologist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Luck
come
of
up
the
in the
draw.
podcast before where, especially with our, maybe not as much in Toronto, but like in the US, you get shuttled into some health insurance plan, and then you have a limited
Yeah,
amount of doctors, and it's like who you end up, well, even in Canada, I guess, I mean, if you,
it's still the
it's not,
same
you don't have
thing.
as much choice. And so it's kind of who you end up with could, basically dictate your entire life. Um,
Exactly.
so
And so there's probably a whole whack load of misophones out there who are still, suffering, trying not to strangle their loved ones
Right.
or
Well, that's why this podcast exists and why I love self-diagnosis from the internet.
So back to the original question about whether or not it's diagnosed more or if it's occurring
Yeah.
more. One of the things that I remember reading about autistic research long, long time ago, it had to be at least 20 years ago, was in Canada, they had discovered that areas that had higher rainfalls throughout the year had higher numbers of people being diagnosed with autism.
Hmm.
And that always stuck with me because I was like, okay, they're not saying it's causative, obviously, it's just associative, but what does it mean? And then when more diagnoses started coming across, I thought now it would be really interesting if they started observing the weather again. Because, of course, with climate change, everything's gone just
Right.
bananas. And so we don't have that same consistency anymore. So if there is something causative about the weather, with these
Mm-hmm.
pregnant women giving birth to autistic individuals, it'd be really interesting to know.
Yeah. When you said that, actually, I thought of, and I'm not a conspiracy person at all. I'm just, it was stuff that came to mind because I grew up in Canada. And I remember in the 80s, there was a big debate about acid rain, you know,
Oh yeah.
but ozone layer as well, but acid rain pollution, and then coming down in the rain. And so when you mentioned more rain and more autism, obviously my mind
Right.
went to that a little bit. But
Well,
yeah,
it's impossible to say.
not drawing a line, but I'm just saying, yeah. That's another thing I'm wondering, some things have been kind of like talked about for a while, but mysteriously no research gets done. And why is that?
Funding.
Yes, yes. And who controls the funding? And then this whole other
Uh-huh.
thing. Let's talk about, so misophonia sound triggers for you growing up. Were you also having issues with the other senses? A lot of us have misokinesia, which is the visual
Um,
triggers.
yes, definitely, because I don't know if this is common or not, the mesokinesia, if it is
Very,
always hand in hand with misophonia or not, but um, like I said, repetition was definitely a big one. And so simple things like
leg
touch,
shaking or touch. Yeah, yeah.
just if okay, at first visually, if I see, and my brother was one of those leg shakers. Good
Yeah.
God, I wanted to cut his leg off.
The Jimmy legs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He has like this crazy metabolism because he's always shaking. But anyway, that was one of the physical things that. But I used to just like put my nails into his leg, and he would stop briefly. The other was if somebody's touching me and the touch is repetitive, like even if it was a massage, but they lingered a little too long in one spot, all of a sudden.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's been visual and tactile as well. And then the sound, if the sound is repetitive, definitely that has the strongest
Hmm.
reaction.
For you, are there certain types of music that are an issue as well? Because modern music is based on repetition. I'm just curious if they're.
Well, this is the one thing that because I really reacted to country music and I never
Oh God,
understood
so do
why.
I. But
The
not
phone,
necessarily.
there was a time when I was doing my undergrad and I was doing some student work in a lab to make some money at the same time. And I walked in to the lab that day and somebody was playing country music. There was a CD in the player and it just struck me. And I don't remember this. I apparently walked up to the thing, popped it out, took the CD and snapped it in half. And the person who owned it came over in shock and I handed it to her and said, "Don't play country music." And then I kind of came back.
Yeah.
So they never played country music in that lab again. But I had never thought of it until again I had the diagnosis and it's like, yeah, because there's a twangy repetition for me in a lot.
Right.
Now, mind you, it's a lot of older country music, but I still associate it's if it sounds country, it feels like it's trying to tear my skin off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to stop it.
Yep. I hear you. Okay. No, that. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm also not a fan of country.
And anything else, I can enjoy, techno and pop and
Yeah, I was
stuff.
gonna get
But
into that stuff, right? Like
yeah,
these electronic music is very
I
repetitive, obviously.
I can enjoy it, but only is very limited. But it doesn't hit me right away.
Yeah.
But once it does finally kind of, okay, this is my max, then it's my max. And that's one of the things, again, with my son, um, kids and screens in this day and age and playing all these different games. And computer games and, well, video games, their sounds are all repetitive.
Right.
So it takes very little time for me to tell him, turn the volume off. And he does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does he
I'm just like,
use?
no.
Yeah. Does he have it on speaker, like on the speaker, or do you just have him use earbuds?
Usually he's playing on my tablet, so
Mm,
it's just blasting out. He just turns the volume down,
gotcha.
but he's also really, really into that type of music, and there are well, God knows how many. It's not like I run around checking out YouTube, but there are a couple of channels that he really likes where they just play that music from that game. And
Okay.
yeah, he really likes that. So I have to do the mental compromise of, okay, this is stimming for him. So I don't,
Mm.
I got to let him do it, but he knows that there's a limit.
Interesting. Um, so yeah, getting back to you maybe a comment you made earlier about obviously misanthropy. As an adult, you have to interact with adults at some point. I'm
Oh,
curious, how does that work in terms of work or outside work, socializing? Does any of that
well,
happen?
I guess I'm fortunate in one way and not at the same time. Because of a bunch of health issues that have arisen
Mm-hmm.
in the past 7 years, I'm on disability, so I don't go into a workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at home most of the time. So, other than the people living upstairs in the house I'm in, who drive me bonkers with their
Mm.
sound, because this is not a soundproofed environment, the only time is on public transit,
Mm.
or in a shop
GTC.
somewhere. Yeah, DTC. In a shop somewhere, or when I'm either dropping my son off or picking him up, because those parents are just fascinating individuals if I wanted to do a PhD. But I don't.
Aren't they just
Not on
staring at
them.
their phones?
A good portion of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're what's the word? They're millennials. I'm Gen X.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of don't fit in with them, and I don't know. It's really strange to me to witness it because I was like, well, we're all parents of kids the same age, but I had my boy I was 39.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of them might be that age now. The interactions with them, because they definitely give off that air of entitlement, which includes things like taking up my space with their sound
Oh,
and
yes.
their everything. So, yeah, I've had a couple of, well, I don't want to say confrontations, but I'm I'm blank for a better word. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's yeah, actually, yeah, we were going to come back to some some maybe anecdotes. Do you have any kind of like anecdotes, because you said you are more on the fight side, and I'm sure a lot of people would relate.
Um. Well, I was known in high school as a very angry. Like I know there was the
Mm-hmm.
teenage angst, but I was known as angry.
Yeah.
Um, I did have the nickname Psycho,
Yep. Good one.
and
Yep.
I guess there have been some times where I probably crossed the line before I realized it. Just
Mm-hmm.
um, but people tended to just chalk that up to my personality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if I slam somebody against a locker or
Mm-hmm.
threw someone
Mm-hmm.
in a garbage can, like it just, I don't know, I got away with a lot.
Were those related to sounds, or was it just Lizness?
Sometimes sound, usually more just because people existed and they were in my vicinity. Because
Mm-hmm.
I definitely was known for being very sharp-witted with my tongue, and that's usually with the
You
adults.
never used profanities, though, I'm sure.
Almost never.
Really?
Almost never.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't need to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've always been a very big fan of British humor, and
Yeah. Of
so
course. Yeah.
I found that they seem to they seem to lack an understanding of the English language for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, and so I
Mm-hmm.
just used that on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was my coping mechanism because I can't stand people. So at least if I could amuse myself, then
Mm-hmm.
you know, okay, you're a
Humor
joke.
is humor is a coping method on its own.
Yes,
So,
it is. Well,
um,
I've always said my life is a series of stupid stories. Um, Seriously, I should actually write a movie script
yeah,
for it.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
um, I've also said if it wasn't for humor, I probably would have killed myself a long time ago. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely a coping mechanism. Let's see now. So the my son's father, who we separated in 2020, um,
Pre-COVID
he's
or
yeah, because
okay.
that was a brilliant time for me to move from
Yeah.
one province to the other. It was July 2020 when I moved,
Ooh.
right in the middle. So, brilliant. Um, he had some repetitive behaviors that I kind of had to coach out of him.
Mm.
I don't know how you would really describe it, just idiosyncrasies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but like they were things that he did un, unwittingly, like it wasn't really a conscious thing. And of course, I made him conscious of it. And so I think he was conscious enough to avoid doing it in my presence. I don't think he stopped necessarily doing any of those things because he was also neurodivergent himself. And
Mm.
so probably stimming a bit for him.
Mm.
Um, but other relationships, other than the
Mm-hmm.
snoring was definitely one, and I have smothered a few briefly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
because
you
the
just need to
pillows
do
were,
it briefly until they stop breathing. So
no, exactly. Well,
yeah.
it's, you work with what you got. It's the
Yeah.
middle of the night. You're tired. What's there is a pillow. I
Yeah.
mean, and if they start choking, they wake up and they stop doing that. So,
Right. Right.
although one guy went far enough to actually go and get surgery. He had
Mm,
his,
yeah. The
yeah, he
whatever
had his
deviated
adenoids
septum
and
and all that,
tonsils.
whatever it is. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
tonsils. Yeah. Gotcha.
and I don't even remember if it helped or not, but I guess I must have punched him in the gut once in the middle of
Mm-hmm.
the night, and so he kind of took that as a hint.
Mm. Yeah.
Sometimes I really don't remember, so yeah. Otherwise, it wasn't something that came to light because, of course, I didn't know then that it was misophonia either. So it was probably something more that I attributed to their own individual characteristics and them just being annoying, which,
Yeah.
of course, went quite well along with the fact that they're human, and so their existence already annoyed me.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're already at a
So
disadvantage. Yeah.
yeah, and they know that too.
Right.
They usually discover that pretty early on with me. I don't know why they tried. Now that you brought that up,
You're like, yeah,
I-
let's date. I don't know why. I don't want you to exist, but yeah, let's date for a while.
well, I could go full exposure and say it wasn't
Right.
exactly an emotional connection I was seeking. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
There we go.
which is
There we go.
why now I don't bother with people at all.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got two guinea pigs and two cats, and their sounds don't bug me.
What are your? I mean, what are your? Obviously, yeah. So you obviously stay away from people, and you pointed out things, your public transportation and whatnot. Do you have other coping methods? Like, do you have, I don't know, like earbuds, noise canceling headphones? I'm just kind of curious when you go to the grocery store or
Well,
wherever.
I do like to listen to music, so I will put my earbuds in.
Okay.
For that's another interesting thing is for the period after I'd given birth and during a postpartum depression, up until probably just this past year, the paranoia that I developed made it difficult for me to use music to block out other sounds because I was worried about missing sounds that were
Mm,
threatening.
mm.
So I've only started to re-engage in that. And yeah, being able to blast my music and not hear anything else is a big, big help.
So you were you was it related to your son that you were afraid of missing sounds, like basically him?
That was part of it.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
part of it. The paranoia it was extreme. Like first of all, I
Mm-hmm.
was terrified of my own baby.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and then the transition to solid foods, I took a very methodical scientific approach to it, and I didn't sleep. I was
Mm,
constantly processing information about what was the next food item and if there was a reaction and
mm.
stuff like that. And yeah, then there was the I need to be able to see him and hear him all the time. So yeah, I stopped listening to music until he started listening to, the Wiggles and whatever, and
Right.
that's
Right.
repetitive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I listen to the Wiggles too. curious, kind of what does your son think of your misophonia? Like you said, you talk about it. I'm just curious, kind of what his thoughts are with me.
Well, he's a very, very intelligent
Mm-hmm.
person. The last time he was tested for his cognitive abilities, he functions at least 2 years older than his
Mm-hmm.
age.
Mm-hmm.
So like he understands a lot of things that a lot of adults don't even understand. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how much of my particular problem he understands, but he does know repetition can make his mom sick and
Mm-hmm.
that I can end up vomiting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he does know that certain sounds cause me to, I try not to react as angrily as I used to. So he just knows they bother me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of it really. As far as I know, we
Yeah.
haven't gone into any depth with it. I also suffer from migraines, but he doesn't seem to have any empathy where that's concerned when he
Okay.
wants something. So yeah, it's hard for me to tell exactly where the line is for him.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah. Speaking of, so you mentioned migraines. I'm just curious, like, are there comorbid conditions that you have that you don't mind bringing up if
Oh,
you have
good
any?
God. I'd be listing off a lot, but
Okay.
the migraines definitely.
Yeah.
I'm a human barometer,
Mm.
so every time the atmospheric
Oh.
pressure drops, my
Yeah.
migraines hit. And
Mm.
not every single time, but I can guarantee that the pressure is dropped if I get hit with a migraine.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I've actually done comparisons where I wake up and my brain is in a certain state, and I'm like, I'm going to check the weather network. And they're saying, oh, it's going up. And I'm like, no, it's not. And then about an hour later, they've changed it. Like, yeah,
Gotcha.
I should work for them
Yeah. Oh
if
yeah.
your barometers don't work.
No,
So yeah,
you just have make a website that you update based on how
yeah,
you're feeling, and then paywall it.
yeah. My
You'd
migraine
be rich.
barometer, that would be
Uh,
lovely. So yeah, the migraines, and definitely when I'm hit with a migraine, I can't tolerate any sound because it's painful. Um, so then, of course, I'm also far less tolerant of everything. And so if I was to have any of that type of triggering sound around me, I'm pretty sure I would not stop myself from hurting somebody.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
typically with a migraine, I'm in the dark alone, yeah, is somewhere.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I can't be around people with that.
Yeah. Well, Liz, yeah, we're heading up close to an hour, and yeah, anything. We've covered a lot of ground, obviously, but I don't know anything else you want to share about yourself, your son, kind of
Mm.
like what you've I don't know, yeah, you've obviously somebody who's thought about misophonia a lot. Anything you want to share? Actually, I'm curious. Do you know anyone else who has misophonia? I don't know if we talked about this in the past, but
Um,
not like you interact with a lot. But
mm, yeah, exactly. No, I can't
yeah.
say that I remember meeting anybody. I remember when I had first discovered it, I had posted something that somebody else with misophonia had written to describe it, just on my Facebook. And one of my high school friends read it and he responded saying, "That sounds horrible." And I'm like, uh-huh. And he was one of my
Right.
close friends in high school, so he was one of the people who thought I was psycho.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of just opened a window for him there. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, she wasn't nuts. Or
Gotcha.
she was nuts because of sound. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's great.
Um,
You're spreading awareness at least, and maybe he'll recognize
yeah.
it in somebody
Yeah.
else.
I have actually, when I previously spoke with you, I had not told any family members about it. I have spoken with my dad about it now. And he is aware of it, although he has such a horrible sleep disorder that he has no memory most of the time. So
Mm.
he can forget and repeat himself. And I'm like, you're repeating it. Stop talking. Just stop
Mm-hmm.
talking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing I have discovered recently, um, as a trigger, is that when two people try to talk to me at the same time, and this happens a lot when you have a kid, I don't know why. One starts talking and the other one always has to start talking too. That one is a mega trigger for me. And I snap back pretty sharp, uh, pretty fast. Like I remember the last time it was, once again, it was my father and my son, and the two of them are both talking at me. Neither of them waits to see if I acknowledge one of them. They just, and I'm trying to decipher the conversations. And finally, I just yelled at both of them. I cannot understand you if you're both talking to me. But it was really because it was just constant sound, period. And I was like, oh, no.
I can definitely
Misophonia.
feel that. I definitely do have an issue with two people talking at the same time and then neither of them realizing that, neither of them thinking, maybe I should just kind of like hold off and
Yeah.
let one conversation happen. And I think for me, it's like worse when I'm always paranoid that as soon as I start talking, somebody else is going to start talking at the same time because they thought of something to say. It's like, and then I feel like, I don't know if it's, I'm always looking for the Murphy's Law, but I feel like it always happens that way where I'm in a group of people, I'll think of something to say, but it just happens to be as soon as somebody else is going to start.
I have something similar but opposite to that, where somebody will make me think of something, and I'm so terrified I'm going to forget it that I try to seek any opportunity to get it out there, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'll be wandering around all day going, what was that?
Yeah. Right.
Plus, I think my thoughts are far more important anyway. So.
Well, of course they are. Second to mine, but yeah, well, cool, Liz. I mean, yeah, Liz, this is great catching up. And the time flew by again. We might have to obviously we'll have to talk to you again at some point. Always love talking to Canadian misophones, especially the best kinds. And thanks again for coming on. And good luck with everything and with your son. Thank you again, Liz. Fun conversation as always, and I hope we stay in touch. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. It's even easier to send a message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast. Follow there or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, and on Twitter X, if you're still using that, it's Misophonia Show. Support the show by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. The music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.